I need to vent about something that happened last weekend because it's still weighing heavily on me. For context, I'm a 34-year-old single man who's always been the black sheep of the family compared to my siblings. My sister, Lauren, just got engaged to her boyfriend, Ethan, and my parents hosted a massive engagement party at their place to celebrate. What I overheard that night completely shattered my view of my family, and I'm still grappling with how to move forward. Let me provide some background first. I've always known my family sees me as less successful, but I chalked it up to typical sibling rivalry. After my younger brother, Daniel, passed away in a tragic car crash 3 years ago, everything changed. He was the golden child, married his college sweetheart by 25, had 2 kids by 30, worked in investment banking, and lived the perfect suburban life with a picture-perfect home. When Daniel died, it hit me harder than anyone anticipated. We weren't particularly close growing up, but his loss sent me into a dark spiral. I isolated myself, let my health deteriorate, and my apartment became a mess. My family kept pushing me to pull myself together, saying Daniel wouldn't want me wasting my life. So I took their advice to heart. I threw myself into my career, started working out consistently, overhauled my diet, and moved into a nicer place. Over the past 3 years, I've earned 2 promotions and now manage a region for a mid-sized logistics firm. I'm in the best shape of my life, financially stable, and live in a great part of town. But apparently, none of that matters to my family because I'm still unmarried and childless at 34. My parents have always been subtle about their disappointment in my life choices. They'd drop hints about wanting more grandchildren, ask when I'd settle down, or tease me about being a lifelong bachelor. My sister, Lauren, has been more blunt. She's always treated me like I'm a lost cause who can't get his act together, despite my achievements. So, when Lauren got engaged to Ethan 6 months ago, I knew I'd be expected to play the supportive big brother. Ethan seems like a solid guy, works in marketing, drives a fancy car, treats Lauren well from what I can see. They've been together for 2 years and my parents adore him. He's practically the son-in-law they dreamed of, especially after losing Daniel. The engagement party was meant to be a grand affair at my parents' house. Around 50 people were invited, extended family, close friends, and some of Ethan's relatives. My mom had been planning it for weeks, and as usual, I was roped into helping with setup. I arrived at their house Saturday morning at 9 to start arranging tables, chairs, and decorations in the backyard. Typical grunt work that always seems to fall on me at family events. I'd been working for about 3 hours when I realized we needed more chairs from the garage. The party was starting soon, and we were behind schedule. I headed through the kitchen to get to the garage, but stopped when I heard my dad's voice. He was talking to my uncle, Greg, and a few other early arriving relatives. Here's where things get wild. I had my phone in my pocket, and earlier that day, I'd been using a voice memo app to jot down ideas for a work presentation I'm giving next week. Unbeknownst to me, the app was still recording in the background. When I heard my name mentioned, I froze and listened. My dad was saying I was essentially a biological failure. He said no woman would want a broken man who can't give her a family, that I must be incapable of sustaining a relationship since I'm still single at my age. My Aunt Patricia laughed and called me a walking warning for other families. She actually used those words, a walking warning. Then my mom joined in, and this part hit me like a punch to the gut. She said she'd given up on me having kids after Daniel's death, as if his accident somehow tainted me too. She called Daniel the one with strong family values and said I was just the leftover son who couldn't figure out how to grow up. The group was dissecting my shortcomings like I was some kind of failed experiment, but it got worse. Lauren walked into the kitchen and jumped into the conversation. She laughed about how at least I was good for physical tasks, that I might not be able to land a partner, but I could haul furniture and set up events. Ethan, her wonderful fiancé, added that every family needs a pity case to make everyone else look better. My uncle suggested starting a crowdfunding campaign titled, "Help this hopeless bachelor find a date." I stood there for about 10 minutes, hearing my entire family ridicule every part of my existence. They mocked how much time I spend at the gym, saying I must be overcompensating. They joked about my apartment being too neat, claiming it showed I couldn't live with someone else. They even speculated about my limited dating life, wondering if I had some deep emotional issues that made me unlovable. The whole time, I'm thinking, these are the people I've been bending over backward to help for years. Whenever someone needs heavy lifting, I'm the first call. When my parents wanted their bathroom remodeled last year, I spent 4 weekends working for free. When Lauren moved apartments, I took a day off work to pack and move her stuff. And this is how they really view me, as the family pity case who's only good for manual labor. I kept my composure, went back outside, finished setting up, chatted with guests as they arrived, congratulated the happy couple, and smiled for photos. Inside, I was reeling from what I'd heard, but I kept my face neutral. Years of being the dependable brother taught me how to mask my true feelings. After the party wrapped up around 11 p.m. and everyone left, I went home and sat in my apartment, processing. I checked my phone for my work notes and realized the voice memo had recorded everything. 4 hours of audio, including that entire 10-minute conversation where my family tore me apart. I listened to it at least 20 times that night. Every harsh word, every laugh at my expense, every dismissal of my worth as a person. I saved copies on multiple devices, uploaded it to the cloud, and ensured I had backups. Then I sat there thinking about my next steps. I've been frustrated with how my family treats me for a long time. Since Daniel's death, they've acted like I'm the runner-up son who can never measure up to what they lost. I've been working on myself, building my career, getting healthy, partly because I knew one day I'd need to stand up for myself. I just didn't expect it to happen like this. I spent the rest of the weekend strategizing, not plotting some grand revenge, but thinking about the boundaries I needed to set and the conversations that had to happen. These people have been exploiting my help while mocking me behind my back, and that stops now. On Tuesday, my mom texted, asking if I could help move furniture for a friend of theirs that weekend. Normally, I'd agree without hesitation. This time, I replied that I was done with manual labor and suggested they hire movers. She seemed baffled and asked why I was being so difficult. On Wednesday, Lauren called, asking me to run errands for her wedding planning, picking up decorations, moving supplies, basically doing all the heavy lifting while she made the big decisions. I told her I was busy with my own priorities. She got annoyed, saying I was being selfish during her special moment, that family is supposed to pitch in. On Thursday, my dad called, saying he needed help clearing out the garage and couldn't understand why I was suddenly acting this way. He mentioned sorting through Daniel's old belongings they'd been storing. I told him I wasn't being difficult. I was done being the family's go-to laborer while everyone else relaxed. That phrase made him pause. He started backpedaling, saying he didn't know what I meant, asking where this attitude came from. I didn't explain further, just said I was unavailable for family tasks and ended the call. By Friday, the whole family was texting and calling, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. My mom left a voicemail about how family supports each other, and I was being unreasonable. Lauren sent a long text about how I was making her engagement about me, that this was her time to shine. The thing is, I hadn't even revealed my trump card yet. They had no clue I'd overheard their conversation, no clue I had it recorded. They just knew something had shifted, and they were starting to panic because their reliable worker had grown a spine. I decided to let this stew a bit longer before making my next move. Watching them squirm felt satisfying after years of being taken for granted. They were about to learn that their family scapegoat had been paying attention all along. Update 1, thank you all for the support on my last post. Many of you encouraged me to hold firm and not let them walk all over me, which really validated my anger. This week has been intense, and I need to update you because my family's reactions have been way more dramatic than I expected. When I left off, I'd started refusing to be their free labor, and they were getting confused and upset. That was just the start. By this past weekend, things escalated, and I'm seeing just how much they relied on me as their default problem solver. On Saturday morning, my dad showed up at my apartment unannounced, knocking at 8 a.m. like that was normal. When I answered, he launched into how he needed help moving heavy boxes to their attic, and couldn't understand why I was being so difficult lately. He said my mom was upset about my behavior, and they were worried something was seriously wrong. I reiterated that I was done with manual labor. He looked confused and asked what I meant, so I laid it out clearly. I'm finished being the family member everyone calls for grunt work. I have my own life and priorities. He argued that helping family is just what we do. I pointed out that it's been one-sided, and I couldn't recall the last time anyone helped me with anything significant. He got defensive, listing times they'd supposedly helped me, but most were outdated or just standard family gestures like hosting a holiday dinner. We talked for about 30 minutes in my doorway. He kept probing about what had changed, asking if I was stressed at work, struggling financially, or upset about being single. I told him it wasn't about any of that. It was about setting boundaries and not being taken for granted. He left, but not before saying he'd talk to my mom about holding a family meeting to figure out what was wrong with me. The idea that they needed an intervention because I stopped doing free labor was very telling. On Sunday afternoon, Lauren called, and this conversation was even more revealing. She started off sweet, asking if I was okay, but it was clear she was digging for answers about my sudden unavailability. She said she'd spoken to Dad and he was worried about my attitude. I asked her to specify what concerned her. She said I was being selfish and uncooperative, putting my own needs above family duties. I asked her to define those duties. She stumbled, talking about how families support each other and we've always relied on one another. So I asked when she last helped me with anything. She went quiet, then claimed she was always there for me emotionally. I nearly laughed because I couldn't recall a meaningful personal conversation with her in years. Our interactions were mostly her asking for favors and me agreeing. The call got heated when she brought up her wedding planning. She said she was counting on me for setup and cleanup, that it wasn't fair for me to bail during such an important time. I told her she had months to make other arrangements and could hire professionals for the tasks she expected me to do for free. She got upset, saying I was ruining her big day, that she couldn't believe I was being so selfish during her engagement. I asked why my labor was so critical to her wedding, why she couldn't celebrate without me doing physical work. She couldn't answer, just kept saying it wasn't fair and that I was changing the rules. Then she started crying, saying she didn't understand why I was being so cruel, that we used to have a great relationship. I realized she genuinely believed we had a strong bond, when to me, it was just me doing favors while she treated me like the family failure. On Monday, my mom texted, inviting me to dinner to discuss what was going on. I agreed, curious to see how they'd handle this as a group. When I arrived, my parents were clearly ready for some kind of intervention. They sat me down in the living room, and my mom started talking about how worried they were about my recent behavior. She said they'd spoken to Lauren, and everyone thought I might be having a mental health crisis. The fact that they assumed I was mentally unstable because I stopped being their unpaid help was astounding. I asked them to clarify what behaviors concerned them. My dad said I was being difficult and distant, refusing to help family members in need. My mom said I seemed angry and withdrawn, not acting like myself. I told them I was acting exactly like myself, just with healthier boundaries. I explained that I'd spent years dropping everything whenever the family needed physical help, and I was done with that role. I wanted relationships that weren't based on me being a laborer. They seemed genuinely confused. My mom said she'd never asked me to do anything I didn't want to do, that I always seemed happy to help. I pointed out that I'd never said no before, so how would she know if I wanted to do it? She had no response. My dad tried a different angle, saying helping family is part of being a good person, that we all do things we don't enjoy. I asked what he'd done lately for the family that he didn't want to do. He mentioned helping my mom with some landscaping, but when I pressed, it turned out he enjoyed gardening and had chosen to plant the trees she wanted. The conversation went in circles for over an hour. They kept framing my boundaries as selfishness or a mental health issue, while I kept asking why my labor was so essential to our family dynamic. They couldn't explain why me refusing to move boxes was such a crisis. The most revealing moment came when my mom said she just wanted things to go back to normal, that she didn't understand why everything had to change. I asked her what normal meant to her, and she described exactly what I'd been frustrated about, me being available for any physical task, always saying yes. I realized they weren't upset because they thought I was struggling. They were upset because they'd lost their go-to solution for any task requiring effort. They'd built family plans around my automatic availability, and now they had to find alternatives. When I left, they were still confused and frustrated. They kept asking how they could fix whatever was wrong, unable to accept that nothing was wrong. I was just setting boundaries they weren't used to. On Tuesday, my Uncle Greg texted, saying my parents had asked him to check on me. He wanted to know if I was having financial trouble or needed to talk. I replied that I was fine, just establishing healthier boundaries with family obligations. He called that evening, and we talked for about 20 minutes. He seemed genuinely concerned but confused about the drama. He said my parents made it sound like I was having a breakdown, but when I explained my side, he didn't see why everyone was so upset. I think he understands better because he's less affected by my unavailability. He said he got wanting more time for myself, but suggested I ease into the boundaries to avoid conflict. I appreciated his perspective, but told him I was done tiptoeing around. What's striking is that no one has asked if something specific triggered this change. They're all focused on restoring the old dynamic rather than understanding why I wanted it to change. It's like they can't fathom that I might have valid reasons for being fed up. I'm still holding on to the recording from the engagement party. Every time they talk about how much they care or how great our relationships have been, I think about what they really said when they thought I wasn't listening. The contrast between their public concern and private mockery is stark. Next week is Lauren's bridal shower, which my mom has been planning for months. She texted yesterday, asking if I could help set up tables and chairs. I said no and suggested she ask other family members or hire help. She said it wasn't the same, that she was counting on me and didn't know how to manage without my help. I realized this might be the first time she's had to organize an event without assuming I'd handle the physical work. It'll be interesting to see how they adapt. The family meeting my dad mentioned is happening this weekend. Lauren texted that everyone wants to sit down and figure out what's going on with me. I plan to attend, partly to see how they frame this when we're all together. I haven't decided when to reveal that I heard their engagement party conversation. Part of me wants to let them dig themselves deeper first. Every conversation where they claim to care about me makes their true feelings seem more hypocritical. They have no idea their family scapegoat has been listening all along, and everything they're saying now is being weighed against what they said in private. Update 2, I can't even describe what went down at the family meeting this weekend. Remember how I mentioned I had that recording from the engagement party? I finally decided it was time to stop holding back and show them exactly why I'd changed. The fallout has been explosive, and I'm still trying to process it all. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon at my parents' house. My mom had been texting all week about how crucial it was for me to show up, how everyone was worried, how we needed to resolve whatever was wrong. I agreed to go, partly out of curiosity about how they'd handle it as a group, but mostly because I'd decided this was the moment to drop the truth. I spent the week preparing, not just emotionally, but logistically. I ensured the recording was backed up multiple times, planned how I'd present it, and braced myself for their reactions. I'd been angry about their treatment for so long that this felt like a culmination of years of frustration. When I arrived at 2 p.m., everyone was there. My parents, Lauren, Ethan, Uncle Greg, and Aunt Patricia. They'd set up the living room like an intervention, with me in a single chair facing everyone else on the couch. It felt staged, but I went along with it because I knew what was coming. My dad kicked things off, saying they were all concerned about my recent behavior. He said I'd been uncooperative and withdrawn, seeming angry about things that never bothered me before. My mom added that I was refusing to help family members who needed support, that this wasn't the person I'd always been. Lauren got emotional, saying she was hurt that I wasn't supporting her during her engagement. She said wedding planning was stressful enough without worrying about her brother's refusal to help with simple tasks. Ethan nodded, saying he was confused about why I seemed to have an issue with him specifically. They went around the room, sharing their concerns. Uncle Greg said I seemed resentful but wouldn't open up about what was bothering me. Aunt Patricia called me selfish, saying I needed to prioritize family. They all had theories: work stress, loneliness, jealousy over Lauren's engagement, or a midlife crisis. I listened for about 20 minutes as they analyzed me like a puzzle to solve, talking about my behavior without asking me directly. Every time they mentioned how much they cared or how strong our family bonds were, I thought about their real words from the party. When they finished, my dad asked what I thought was causing my attitude change. He said they wanted to understand so they could help. Everyone looked at me, expecting me to explain myself and restore normalcy. I placed my phone on the coffee table and said I wanted to play something before we discussed my attitude. They looked puzzled but agreed. I started the recording at the moment my dad called me a biological failure. The room fell silent as his voice echoed, saying no woman wants a broken man who can't start a family. You could feel the tension as the recording continued with Aunt Patricia calling me a walking warning. My mom's voice came through, saying she'd given up on me having kids after Daniel's death, calling me the leftover son. I watched their faces as they heard themselves. My dad's expression shifted from confusion to realization to panic. My mom covered her face when her voice played, talking about Daniel's superior traits. Lauren looked like she wanted to vanish when her comments about my usefulness for labor came up. When Ethan's voice called me the family pity case, he stood up as if to leave, but I told him to sit and listen. Uncle Greg stared at the floor when his crowdfunding joke played. The room was frozen as their words echoed. When the recording stopped, no one spoke for a full minute. The silence was heavy. My dad finally tried to say it was out of context, that they were just worried and expressed it poorly. I asked what context justified calling me a biological failure. My mom, crying, said they never meant for me to hear it, that they were just venting and didn't mean it. I asked which part she didn't mean, calling me defective because of Daniel's death or giving up on me as a parent. She couldn't answer. Lauren tried to apologize, saying she was just joking and didn't realize how it sounded. I pointed out that she wasn't joking when she expected me to handle wedding labor. I asked if she saw the link between viewing me as a laborer and being upset when I stopped. Uncle Greg said he was just going along with the conversation, that he didn't know me well enough to judge. I told him that made it worse, that he felt okay mocking a stranger to fit in. The conversation that followed was intense. Each person tried to justify their words, minimize them, or shift blame. My dad insisted they were worried about my future and wanted me to be happy. I asked how calling me broken helped my happiness. Uncle Greg said he didn't really think I was hopeless. I asked why he thought it was okay to joke about my personal life at a family event. Aunt Patricia claimed she was trying to motivate me to find someone, that tough love works better than coddling. I asked if she'd ever tried actual support instead of judgment, if she'd ever had a real conversation with me about my life. The most intense exchange was with my mom. She kept saying she loved me and wanted the best, that her words came from care. I told her that if this was her love, I'd rather have her indifference. I asked how comparing me to my dead brother was supposed to make me feel valued. She broke down, sobbing about how losing Daniel was so hard, and she just wanted her remaining kids to have his kind of life. I told her that was her grief speaking, not love, and that she'd been taking her loss out on me for 3 years. The discussion lasted over 2 hours. They all tried to downplay their comments or blame others, but no one fully owned up to their cruelty. They seemed more focused on defending themselves than understanding my pain. When my dad suggested we move past this and rebuild our relationships, I said we weren't moving anywhere until they acknowledged what they'd done and changed how they treated me. I said I wouldn't return to being their go-to laborer while they mocked me privately. Lauren got upset, saying she couldn't plan her wedding if I held grudges over silly comments. I told her that was the issue. She saw me as essential for logistics, but my feelings as secondary. I suggested she hire professionals for the tasks she'd expected me to do. By the time I left, no one was happy. They thought I was being too harsh, that I should forgive since they'd apologized. They didn't grasp that apologies don't erase the pain of learning how your family truly sees you. This past week has been telling. My parents keep texting, alternating between apologies and frustration that I won't let it go. Lauren's been panicking about her wedding and keeps asking when I'll help again. Ethan stayed out of it, but Lauren keeps pulling him into discussions about my unreasonableness. Uncle Greg actually seemed to understand better. He called a few days later, saying he got why I was angry, that hearing those comments would have hurt him too. He didn't push me to forgive everyone, just said he hoped we could rebuild on better terms. Aunt Patricia texted, saying I was too sensitive and needed thicker skin, that families say things they don't mean. I didn't respond because her message showed she learned nothing. What's clear this week is that they're all focused on restoring the old dynamic rather than fixing what was wrong with it. They want me to forgive them so things can return to normal, but normal was the problem, them exploiting my help while belittling me privately. The recording was a bombshell because it left no room for them to deny their true feelings. They can't claim they respect me when there's proof they called me a failure and a pity case. I'm still figuring out how to move forward. Part of me feels validated for confronting them, but part of me is mourning the family relationships I thought I had, even if they were flawed. One thing's certain. I'm not going back to being their convenient laborer while they mock me in secret. They'll have to figure out how to manage events and tasks without assuming I'll always say yes. If they can't respect that boundary, then we don't have relationships worth saving. Final update: it's been 3 months since the family meeting where I played that recording, and I wanted to give a final update because the aftermath has been both predictable and surprising. Many of you asked how things turned out, and watching my family navigate life without their go-to laborer has been more revealing than I expected. The week after the meeting was chaos. My phone was constantly buzzing with messages and calls from family members, each trying to pull me back to the old dynamic. My dad took the guilt trip approach, talking about family duty and how Daniel would be disappointed in my behavior. My mom leaned on emotional tactics, sending long texts about her love for me and how she couldn't understand why I was punishing everyone. Lauren swung between anger and panic as her wedding neared. She kept calling, asking when I'd get over my anger and help with setup. When I reiterated that I wasn't available for labor, she accused me of sabotaging her big day out of spite. I pointed out that her wedding shouldn't hinge on my free work, which seemed to genuinely puzzle her. The most surprising response came from Ethan. About 2 weeks after the meeting, he showed up at my apartment to talk. He said he'd reflected on his comments and realized he'd been completely out of line. He admitted he'd been trying to fit in with my family, but now saw how cruel that was. I appreciated his accountability, but I told him understanding the issue and changing behavior were different things. I said if he wanted to join this family, he needed to consider what kind of dynamic he was endorsing. That conversation sparked something. Ethan started noticing how my family treated me, how they assumed I'd handle physical tasks, how they talked about my choices, how they saw me as a helper rather than an equal. Meanwhile, reality hit for everyone else. Lauren's bridal shower was the first big test of how they'd manage without me. My mom had planned it assuming I'd handle setup and cleanup. When I confirmed I wouldn't help, she had to scramble to find alternatives. She ended up paying $350 for a setup service, work I'd done for free for years. It was stressful for her because she'd never had to coordinate with vendors before. She'd always relied on me to handle everything.